Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 712 for the 29.May 2022. Richard Saunders coming to you from looking out the Skeptic Zone window, sunny blue skies, Sydney, Australia. Coming up on this week's show, I catch up with my old friend Dr Siobhan O'Sullivan. Now, those of you who have been listening to the show for a while might remember that Dr Siobhan, Maynard and I went on a ghost hunt not far from here in the suburb of Glebe some time ago, mostly because we wanted to go on a ghost hunt, but it was sort of spurred on by the fact that Dr. Siobhan has terminal ovarian cancer. And she has such a positive and wonderful outlook in life regardless that she wanted to check out places to haunt after she dies. Anyway, I catch up with her because she's also been lately very interested and very prominent in the discussion of voluntary assisted dying. And new laws have just been passed in this state. Dr. Siobhan was there at the Parliament when these laws were passed, so we'll find out all about that coming up at the top of the show. And what a wonderful example Dr. Siobhan sets. Strong, positive outlook, regardless of the slings and arrows. And talking about ghosts, after that we look at TikTok ghost hunters. Did you hear that, Dr. Siobhan? Maybe after you become a ghost, you can turn up on TikTok. Anyway, we look at TikTok live ghost hunters. People wandering around abandoned buildings with all sorts of weird and wonderful gadgets, trying to talk with ghosts. And this sort of follows on from our TikTok series, looking at TikTok divination and TikTok psychics. Then to round off the show, we dive back into the Trove archives. This time we head for the United States and look up references to my old friend, James the Amazing Randi, who certainly looked for a ghost or two in his time. Before we start, of course, we're all upset and outraged and nonplussed about the events that took place in Texas in the last week, this seemingly never-ending cycle. And what a terrible situation, of course, for the parents of those poor kids, but also for the teachers. Now, I have quite a few friends who are teachers, and I admire them very much. I really do. And I saw a teacher on a news service just a few days ago. She didn't know what to say, thinking that now she has to possibly carry a sidearm when she goes to school just to teach little kids. It's beyond belief. So a big shout out to the teachers. I know you're listening, and you know that I admire you. But now it's time for me to run downstairs, and I might as well have a waffle with real Canadian maple syrup, as recommended me by Adrian Hill and the Skeptical Fairy. Now we have to convince Susan Gerbeck to try some. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Dr. Siobhan O'Sullivan, what a thrill it is to see you again. You're not a ghost.
I'm not a ghost.
You're not a
I'm
ghost.
here. Really, it's really me.
Because last time we met, what a fun time we had. You, me, and Maynard wandering around the creepy areas, not too far from here, looking for ghosts.
Not too far from here, looking for ghosts. We didn't see any.
No.
We saw quite a bit of rubbish and signs of people living rough, which is in itself sad, but it's not scary in the same way people from the other world
No, I think we've got more things to worry about in the real world than the other world.
Yes.
But it was a terrific night because you and me and Maynard just had a wonderful, interesting, fun time.
It was very fun.
We were. It's on the Skeptic Zone, folks, and I'll link to that episode in this week's show notes. You can go back and hear our ghost adventures, and I put it on YouTube too.
Yes.
And you could follow us on the map on YouTube, which I thought was quite fun. Anyway, that was great because you told me you were looking for places to haunt, of course. Now, why I've caught up with you, folks. I've caught up with Dr. Siobhan. Dr. Siobhan has ovarian cancer, and she's you're just back from the hospital, aren't you?
Yes, I'm just back from seeing my oncologist, and I have now been through every chemo available for ovarian cancer.
Wow.
And I was the last chemo I was on was really, really difficult to tolerate. And I thought maybe this will do something, but no, the cancer just laughs and continues on its merry way.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have probably a month off chemo now, regroup, and perhaps I'll go on a drug trial if I'm eligible. Otherwise, I'm going to move to a weekly combination of chemo drugs that will just try and slow down the growth.
Okay. But I couldn't help but notice that your hair's all come back.
I've got so much more hair now. So when I go on this new chemo in a month, if that is indeed what happens, I will lose my hair again. And also, unfortunately, the new chemo I'm going to be on isn't on the PBS for ovarian cancer.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really expensive. But anyway, my family has decided I'm worth it, so we're going to proceed.
That's mighty generous of them. I'm glad that
puts pressure on me to try and behave better.
I'm pleased to hear that. So, folks, you can catch up with Siobhan's story again on the previous time that I spoke to her as we were doing, me and Maynard, as we were doing the ghost interview, and you can find out the backstory about her ovarian cancer and those issues. But I've caught up with you today because last week, was it just last week, here in New South Wales, very important legislation went through, which means that this state is now caught up, I think, with the rest of the country. Am I correct? And this is to do with assisted dying.
Yeah, so New South Wales has now passed a voluntary assisted dying law. It will take probably around 18 months to establish the voluntary assisted dying facilities. So it's not something that people will be able to access right away.
Right.
But it is now law, and so the wheels are in motion. I assume that however these things work, a directive will now go out to New South Wales Health to tell people who are going to participate that they can start establishing their centres. But unfortunately, the two territories are being left behind. The Northern Territory did enact a voluntary assisted dying law many years ago. It was very vanguard.
I remember that,
yes. Many years ago. This was during the Howard era. And it was the first in Australia. But then the federal government acted to overrule that law, which, of course, the Northern Territory and the ACT, both being territories, are susceptible to the federal government overruling their own local laws. So prior to the election that we've just had, Scott Morrison, our former Prime Minister, said that he would not consider any changes to the situation in the two territories. Now, of course, we have a new Prime Minister in Anthony Albanese and the Labor Party, and I think that it is possible that there might be a little bit of wiggle room.
I wouldn't be surprised. There seems to be a mood of change in the air, doesn't there?
Look, I really, really do hope so. And it is my view that it is going to be very, very difficult to shut the territories out, particularly the ACT, which is, effectively you cross the road and you're in New South Wales. So to have people on different sides of the road having access to different types of assistance at the end of their lives, to me seems like an unsustainable situation. But that's not to take away from the very, very hard work and dedicated work of the people who lobbied to get these laws introduced. And, I'd like to think that perhaps the territories will have voluntary assisted dying in a few years from now. But I know that for that to happen, there will be a large number of people who will dedicate themselves day in, day out and their resources to make it happen. So I need to acknowledge the really dedicated advocates. And part of the reason I do that is I do feel a little bit self-conscious to the extent that, there were some people there on the day that the law passed in New South Wales who had been campaigning for 50 years for it.
You were there, weren't you? Because
I was
I
there.
know you were there because you were on at least two TV news bulletins.
Yes.
And you were on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald.
I was, yes. So there was a lot of media coverage. It really was very, very much covered across all platforms.
And when we say you were there, you were at Parliament, New South Wales Parliament in Sydney.
Yeah. So there were a number of people who were very actively involved in media conferences and talking about the issue in the week leading up and also on the day. There was a couple of people there with cancer, so people in similar situations to me who are terminally ill. There were people there who were honouring members of their family who had died waiting and wanting voluntary assisted dying.
Right.
And, there are also people for whom, this law will be particularly applicable to people with a range of cancers, the really kind of nasty terminal cancers.
Yes,
But there are also people who, of course, can get motor neuron diseases that are extremely, difficult to live with and are terminal in some cases. And they are the other big group that will benefit from this legislation. And unfortunately, someone who has worked a long time with the voluntary assisted dying people, in particular, I've been trying to work with the Go Gentle, which is Andrew Denton's charity.
Andrew Denton being a very well-respected broadcaster here in Australia, for many years.
Yes, absolutely. Well-known broadcaster, has taken a great interest in voluntary assisted dying, set up a charity called Go Gentle about 5 years ago. And so some of the people with motor neuron disease who have worked a long time with Andrew weren't able to come, unfortunately, to Parliament House. So we had a few representatives from the soon-to-be-dead community, of which I'm now a prominent member.
Soon-to-be ghosts, right?
Soon-to-be ghosts. Yeah. I would love to haunt people. I'm just not quite sure. When I think of all the people who die each day and then the number of ghost sightings, there's a bit of an inefficiency on the part of the ghosts.
Maybe you're right. But you would be a friendly ghost, wouldn't you?
Oh, I just want to have a look at what everyone's up to when I can't see. Well, normally I wouldn't be able to see them.
Maybe you'll get to find out. I don't know. Now tell me, why do you think that New South Wales, this state, was so far behind? I mean, many places in the world have acted on this. And here in Australia, other states have acted upon this. But this state seems to have really dragged its heels.
One of the interesting articles I read, in the last few days since the law was passed in New South Wales was talking about how much more religious, how the proportion of people who identify as religious is greater in New South Wales than in Victoria.
Really?
Yeah, it was a really interesting piece actually. And I mean, so we're talking about something like 34% in Victoria and 48 in New South, that kind of thing. So not absolutely dramatic. It wasn't chalk and cheese, but there certainly was a significantly bigger proportion of people in New South Wales who identify as religious. But also New South Wales politics, quite frankly, it's been corrupt for decades. I mean, it really is very focused on who gets the biggest chunk of land near the harbour.
Yes.
And
Or the new airport or something like that. Or
I mean, honestly, it is a state that is driven by greed and land and wealth and views. And we have not had outstanding leadership at a state level, in my opinion, for some decades. But, of course, this piece of legislation was put forward by an independent, and he has done a really good job at bringing forward a number of really complicated and important pieces of legislation. And importantly for us thinking about the future of Australian politics, was able to broker agreements across the aisle, bring a whole lot of people from diverse political parties into the room. And so on the day that the laws passed in New South Wales, at the press conference, we had people there, of course, from the Liberal Party and Labor Party, and we had independents, Animal Justice Party, the Greens, the Hunters and Fishers were there, the Nationals. So he did a really good job at bringing everyone together. And I think it suggests that maybe, this kind of turn away from the major parties, perhaps it could be beneficial in some way.
It could be. I mean, we will see. It's certainly in the federal election just over, it was quite stark, the number of independents and Greens. And I'm glad to say, but none of the parties that we would consider to be the lunatic fringe, like Pauline Hansard or the IMOP or those sort of parties, they didn't do very well at all.
They didn't do very well.
Hopefully most people can see through their misinformation. Their bluster. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I think we can conclude is that you can't just buy an election in Australia. It's not that easy. Or else, of course, the UAP, United Australian Party, would have done much better than it did.
Yeah. And this is the sort of the party that can't wait for Donald Trump to come back in the United States. We have a lot of fun here in Australia, folks, with our little parties and their funny ideas. Anyway, Dr. Siobhan, it's good news. I think it shows that our society is moving forward. This is a very important issue.
Yes.
And it must have been remarkable for you to be there, because it affects you so personally there on the day. And let's hope that heaven can wait and you don't have to haunt anybody.
Absolutely. I actually was very emotional at the time that we were doing the final press conference. And I feel a bit embarrassed admitting, but I was, thinking about myself, but perhaps that is what humans do
I think we'll give you a pass on that one. It's okay.
And part of the reason why I did become a bit emotional was that it's going to be a really, really big effort for me to still be alive in 18 months, which is how long it will take for it to be established. So it's perhaps unlikely I will ever get to use the laws myself. But that said, I also do have a great deal of respect for palliative care, doctors and nurses and institutions. And it is my hope that I will be able to get to the other side, to the haunting side, just with palliative care, because I'm hoping to avoid the worst of the suffering. And I think that has to do with where the tumours are growing and what organs they take down first and that kind of thing. So I do hope to, even in the absence of established voluntary assisted dying laws in New South Wales, I do hope to, go gentle if I can anyway.
Go gentle, but not without making a statement along the way.
Yes. Well, I think we can conclude that I'm going to continue to be a bit of a pain in people, a thorn in people's side until the end, until the bitter end.
And where should people go to find out more?
Well, first of all, if you put it into Google News, you will get a lot of the media reports. The Go Gentle website is very comprehensive.
Go Gentle website. Okay, people can Google that.
And Dying with Dignity, they've also been campaigning on this issue for a very long time. So if you plug it into Google, you will see plenty of resources.
Well, Dr. Siobhan, look, I'm still keen for another ghost hunt. Whether you're with us in person or in spirit, I don't care. Maybe we can organise that one day.
If you and Maynard are the first people to hear me from the other side, that would be fabulous.
I would look forward to it. Dr. Siobhan, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Hi, this is Brian Dunning. As part of National Science Week in Australia, Canberra Skeptics will be hosting a free screening of my latest documentary, Science Friction. This will be on Sunday, the 14th of August at 1 p.m. at King O'Malley's Pub, 131 City Walk in Canberra. So what is it all about? Well, you know those TV documentaries you see and the science experts they feature? Did you know that producers often edit them out of context and twist their words to make it seem like they promoted some pop sensationalism instead of the real facts? Science Friction exposes this practice and gives the scientists a chance to clear the record. You will be shocked to see how the media can twist their words and intent. That's Sunday, the 14th of August at 1 p.m. at King O'Malley's Pub. For further information about this free event, please visit canberraskeptics.org. Thank you, and I hope you all raise a glass to help promote science and truth-telling in the media. I know I certainly will. And please enjoy the film.
A couple of weeks ago on the Skeptic Zone, we had a segment called TikTok Paranormal, which was following on from a segment I did last year about TikTok Tarot. Now, briefly, these are live videos broadcast through the TikTok system, the TikTok app, of people doing whatever. In fact, there are many live videos on TikTok 24 hours a day of people just doing things, talking to the camera, going about their daily work, and, of course, engaging in paranormal activities. Now, we've covered tarot, and we've covered people using other methods of divination, divining rods, pendulums, that sort of thing. Today, we're going to investigate TikTok ghost hunters, because somewhere around the world, at any one time, it's always night. And there are always people ready to venture out into the darkness, but not in every situation, as we'll get to, in order to investigate ghostly things. What I have discovered is that many of these people enlist the aid of spirit boxes in one form or another. Now, just to refresh your memory, these are radio receivers that quickly scan frequencies, latch onto any given signal, and briefly, maybe for half a second, quarter of a second, a full second, broadcast that frequency and then move on to the next frequency. So sometimes you get words, especially if you're scanning around on the AM dial, you get a lot of talk radio, a lot of words coming through, and that's what you hear. Now, some of these people use real radio scanners, but many of these people are now using apps, ghost hunting apps that either scan frequencies somewhere and broadcast those scanned frequencies in brief bursts, as you'll hear, or apps that, for some reason, add a lot of echoey sound, maybe for dramatic effect, I don't know. And I'm sure there are many ghost hunting apps available for those who wish to use them. Nevertheless, one of the things that struck me about these scanners, no matter if they're real radio scanners or if they're an app on a tablet or a phone or something like that, is that they seem to rely heavily on what we know as audio pareidolia. And this is where you hear something, but your brain interprets it as something else. Here's a classic example. I'm going to play this word to you 3 times. It's an artificial voice making this word or words, you decide. And maybe you know this one, it's a classic. What do you hear? What do you hear being said? Now, I wonder what you heard. Did you hear the term brainstorm? Think of that term, brainstorm. Let me play this again and think of the term brainstorm. I think that time you could clearly hear the words brainstorm or the term brainstorm. But now let me play exactly the same file again, the same word, the same recording. And of course, you're welcome to rewind this part of the show if you are skeptical. This time, I want you to think of the words green needle. Green needle. It's remarkable, isn't it? Every time I do this for myself, I can make my brain interpret brainstorm or green needle. It's bizarre, but that's audio pareidolia. Your mind is affecting what you hear, just like visual pareidolia, where you can see faces in the clouds or whatever. Your brain will manipulate the information coming in through your senses. Bear that in mind as we hear some of these spirit boxes in action. Now, our first TikToker goes by the handle of Burnzebra, I think it's pronounced. And this fellow seems to be wandering around a graveyard. In fact, he is absolutely wandering around a graveyard. It's the dead of night, and he has a flashlight. Let's have a listen.
Like I said, I haven't lied from the start. I am a skeptic. I'm a skeptic. And the first one that I did made me start feeling that I shouldn't be. Oh, look at that. Look at that. More angels. Let's go here. Feet. So, yeah, I was a skeptic, but each one I do, I feel different feelings and different vibes. You know what I mean? I feel eeriness as well, and that, like, it's very astonishing for me. It's really insane. Yes, I'm going to show you the side because, like I said, I don't want to really show the... But there's 1, 2, 3, 4 angels on this gravestone. With respect, is it okay if I leave you now? I'll bring you a gift next time I'm here. But is it okay if I leave you now and let you lay here to rest in peace, Barry? Cousin.
So there we go. And he is using one of these devices, an iPad, I guess it is. Maybe it's an Android device. That doesn't matter. But it's clearly using an app. And in this case, the app is, as far as I can tell by looking at the video, the live video, Paratech. World Output Jammed Session List. I'm just reading off the screen. Sensor live data, and there's lots of little sensory things to read there. It looks almost scientific. Control panel. But again, it's an app, I guess. Paratech. But let's check out the next live TikTok from Ghost Hunting. And this one involves a Ouija board. We can't see the people involved, their faces, because the camera is rather close to the Ouija board. There are 3 people operating the board. It's hard to say where they are, presumably what they consider to be a haunted location. But let's see how they go with their Ouija board.
Why am I cursed? Danny cursed me?
Oh, damn.
Well, no wonder why I killed you. It was probably because you were jealous and you killed me. Why'd she curse me?
Doesn't get too much more interesting than that, though It is very interesting watching them use the Ouija board because there are 3 people using it. 2 people with their fingers on the lower part of the planchette, which is the triangular piece that you move around a Ouija board. But clearly, the person with their finger at the top of the planchette is guiding where it goes. It's quite obvious to see. And that was from a group called Ghost Dusters. And next we come to an account called mad_paranormal_official. Mad Paranormal Official. Husband and wife, Darren and Alex, Paranormal live seance, giveaways on Facebook. Oh, okay. Now they have one of these apps which, on an iPad presumably, if you point it at your subject, a real live person, it draws a stick figure over that subject so they turn into a stick figure. Why? I really don't know. They're in where are they? It looks like possibly, again, an abandoned warehouse or location or who knows what, with a couple of lights right in the background. They also have what seems to be some sort of meter visible on camera. Let's have a listen.
We can't communicate with somebody who we don't know the name.
Doesn't it just show?
Can you repeat that?
Step back.
Liam. Definitely.
Fight or died, yeah.
We need your name.
Penny?
That's gone off.
So maybe by now you're curious, as I'm curious, how many of these people are doing this for a lark or a bit of TikTok entertainment or just a silly fun night out? And how many of these people really think that disembodied spirits are using modern electronic equipment to somehow channel their views and opinions to the people wandering around graveyards and abandoned buildings? That's a very good question. In my experience, I would have to say that a good percentage of these people really honestly think that these devices are being used by dead people to send messages to the living. But I certainly hope some are doing it for a laugh. And next we have an account called SOS Paranormal. Paranormal experiences captured during our live stream with you. And they are presumably in an abandoned building. It's very hard to say because we can't see much. They have a stuffed toy on the ground, a dirty ground near a brick wall, a very old brick wall, and another device which I can't quite make out. Again, it's at night, and also on the screen is a question, what's at the tower? Presumably they're at an historic site. Let's have a listen.
Can you give us a year when this was built, please?
You built this, please. Who built this tower?
Been under 1971, I'm not sure. Was saying please there or something. Hi, Carol.
Now, I'll make the point here that you can often hear these people saying random things as if they're talking to people on the phone. Actually, what they're doing is they're looking at the live screen as they broadcast, and they can see comments and questions sent in by viewers instantly. So often they will simply respond to those questions that are put on the screen, but it sounds a little bit disjointed when you can't see that. And now we have an account called Seeking_the_unknown. Seeking the Unknown. and seeking the unknown, and friends are in what could be an abandoned house in a sad state of disrepair, with another bear, another stuffed little bear on a little cushion on the floor, which the carpet's been ripped off, and the only light source comes from them, I would presume, but in this case, the light source is continually strobing like a disco. Let's have a listen.
Or touch the bear or the dolly or the ghost for us.
Because that's
Mist.
what's happening on my back.
Mist. Yeah, we did have mist. Put it on doll now, Jamie, and bear and that in middle, that's it. Don't forget your screenshots, guys. That were weird. I have never seen that before.
And we do enough colour changing lights to know if it was that or not.
Yeah.
You can't get a light behind you.
No. And when we're facing that way, it lights all that way.
Well, I first... Copycat, are we all copying each other? It's because you've amazed us. We're all amazed.
Now, while before we were concentrating on audio pareidolia, this one seems to be using strobing lights to possibly set up classical visual pareidolia. So I guess they're seeing things as the lights flicker, and they're interpreting that as a ghostly presence. And finally, to wrap up, one more from SOS Paranormal, and it looks like they're in an abandoned factory or possibly something like that. Lots of graffiti on the wall, and they have their camera focused at some distance on a candle near the wall.
Are there any secret places underneath here? Or around here? Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Jessica, how are you?
How many women soldiers were here?
I hope they think we're good, Karen. That's how I try and come across.
Do you think we're good? Do you
I'm
like us?
sliced, by the way. I don't know what actually IDC means. And I don't know. Don't even know what that means.
So again, lots of the time they're simply talking back to the people who are viewing, and at that particular moment, 3,600 people, including myself, were viewing the activities of SOS Paranormal. And the ghostly voices you heard are being generated by some app. And I think, and why not, the app is designed to make the voices sound rather ghostly. TikTok ghost hunters. Live people looking for dead people. Part of the endless 24-hour entertainment cycle, or a serious investigation to look for ghosts.
I'm Mick West. In my podcast, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, I have extended conversations with people who have been involved in conspiracy culture. I do this for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because it's really interesting. These people have great stories about how they fell down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, what they did down there, and what it was that helped them out. Sometimes I also talk to people who investigate conspiracy theories, and they have equally fascinating stories from the other side. Secondly, I want to understand how best to prevent the spread of conspiracy theories and misinformation, which is an increasing problem in a time when alternative media is exploding. The best way to do this is to communicate effectively with the people involved, and the best way to do that is with a nice long chat. So check it out, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, tftrh.com.
Time once again to head back to those digital archives from around the world. Normally, of course, we look at Australian newspapers and magazines and so on, the digitised treasure trove. That is Trove at trove.nla.gov.au. Have a look. But today we're going further afield to the United States. And I've been thinking about my old friend James Randi recently. Some of his books are right on the shelf in here in the studio. So I thought we'd do another search and see what we could find in the printed history for James Randi. Now, maybe for you, just like me, James Randi was a huge influence, and I learnt so much from his books, and there's quite a wealth of James Randi online, especially on YouTube, of course. If you look for James Randi, you can see TV specials he did, documentaries, investigations, and so on, and you can learn an awful lot from that. But I learnt quite a lot from the man himself, and we became very good friends over the years. And every now and then I think to myself, wouldn't it be nice to fly once more to Las Vegas and spend some time at the amazing meeting with James Randi. However, we can still look to these archives and see what we can find. And our first port of call comes to us from the Dover Times-Reporter, dated the 13th of March 1984. Magician told to stay away from Columbus Spook House. Columbus, Associated Press. A magician says he should be allowed in the John and Joan Resch home to help determine whether sleight of hand or something supernatural is causing objects to spontaneously move around. But Mrs. Resch said Monday that she might not allow magician James Randi to join two Case Western Reserve University scientists who want to visit the house today.
If you're going to detect a burglar, you need a burglar,
Randi said, and because he feels most unexplained activity is the result of sleight of hand,
you bring in a magician, an expert in sleight of hand.
Two other investigators have visited the house and said they hope to have a preliminary report ready by the weekend. Bill Roll, director of the Psychical Research Foundation of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and assistant Kelly Powers arrived Sunday to seek the cause of the disturbances which the family says began 10 days ago and seem to focus on 14-year-old Tina. Mrs. Resch said it had been quiet since objects flew, furniture moved, and pictures rattled Sunday morning. Roll and Powers brought video and audio recording devices, but Roll said,
"The first and most reliable tool is common sense. What you're looking for are normal ways in which this person can perpetrate these acts by conscious or unconscious manipulation."
Powers, who describes himself as a clinical psychologist, who has studied such incidences for 8 years, said all of the possibilities have to be eliminated before investigators will consider psychic phenomena. Powers said they will look for patterns in the trajectory, direction, distance, and velocity of moving objects, as well as their proximity to Tina. Roll, author of The Poltergeist, said his foundation has studied 36 similar cases. He said 1/3 of the cases was disproved, 1/3 yield inconclusive findings, and 1/3 was determined to be recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, the unconscious ability of some individuals to affect the movement of objects in their immediate physical environment. Randi is part of a group called the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal. Also coming with Randi are Nicholas Sanderlock, astronomer and research associate at Case Western Reserve, and fellow faculty member Stephen Shaw.
If it's scientists or astronomers who are interested in it, fine.
Mrs. Resch said,
"They can visit, but the magician is not going to visit."
The committee says it has debunked as hoaxes numerous claims of paranormal incidents.
Whenever there is a possibility of hoaxing involved, there should be a professional magician present,
Shaw said.
He, Randi, is a better observer than we are in some things. He's more expert at detecting any form of trickery than any of the parapsychologists, and they will admit it.
So there we go. I wonder what happened. I wonder if Randi ever made it in to investigate that particular event. And now we skip forward many years to the year 1998, published in the Selena Journal on Thursday, the 1st of January. And this is a story by James Talley. He's looking for a few good flakes. In a world so fast-paced and advanced, where few of us can even program our VCRs, we have neither the time nor luxury for confusing claptrap and illusions that parade as illumination. Believe it or not, Florida magician puts a bounty on paranormal claims. The new year is upon us. Time to reflect on our friendly forecasters, the professional psychics. I won't bore you with the National Enquirer's psychic strikeouts this year, and I'm saving the 1-800 hotlines for 1999, a year more pregnant with possibilities. This year, it's time to put your money where your powers are. Correction, you risk no money, and you stand to gain gobs of it. I'm talking about the challenge, an international dare to those professing to possess paranormal abilities. Bend a spoon or two, walk away with $1.1 million. Sponsored by the James Randi Educational Foundation of Fort Lauderdale, challenge rules are basic. You and the James Randi Educational Foundation agree on experimental parameters, what will and won't constitute definitive proof of your powers. You go to Florida and show your stuff. If you're for real, James Randi and other pledges will fork over a cool $1 million. What's more, you may get to see Mr. Randi eat his hat. Randi, also known as the Amazing Randi, 69, is a man with a mission. He's not out to save souls under the challenged tutelage of a spirit guide. The renowned magician, rationalist, author, is perhaps the world's most famous exposer of fraud in matters supernatural. He's debunked Uri Geller, Nostradamus, and con games galore. Think of him as Agent Scully with a beard, although Randi wouldn't put up with half of Mulder's nonsense. Randi's foundation, www.randi.org, is real. So is his challenge. The prize money? No one knows. Out of 78 who began negotiations, none have seen it through, preferring to quit when Randi insists on rigorous scientific methodology. Homeopaths hedged. Dowsers demurred. Even the maker of the laundry ball, a device alleged to ionize the ickies off your clothes, decided not to take the plunge. Small wonder. Most of these mountebanks make more moolah than the DNC. Why submit to testing when you could derail your gravy train? Randi can't give accurate figures on the paranormal industry's revenues.
It's like trying to determine how much bookies make.
But he estimates it's a $1 billion swindle. Cop-out cranks make Randi more cranky than usual. Nothing would please him more than to put his favorite con artists to the test. And his targets vary widely, from televangelists to psychic hotlines to TMers. And I think TM in the TMers stands for Transcendental Meditation. It goes on. The latter's claim that their discipline confers invulnerability prompted Randi to devise a simple experiment. He'd swing a baseball bat and... ... What's his real beef?
I'm finding people being swindled by things they don't understand,
he said.
They'll invest their lives in it in some cases. You don't know how many people literally go down the drain financially and emotionally because they depend on these things. I feel like the fellow who sees somebody struck by a car and decides he better do something about it.
But don't the gullible reap what they sow? Randi doesn't see it that way. In fact, he predicts a class action lawsuit against telephone psychics in the near future, though he's frustrated by the lack of governmental outrage at these scams. Outrage needed for real education campaigns and crackdowns with teeth. It's popular to believe in seemingly harmless hokum, so politicians sit silent.
They care more about being elected than making sure people are fairly treated.
He fumes. The deeper evil in the paranormal, he maintains, is how it muddies our thinking. In a world so fast-paced and advanced, where few of us can even program our VCRs, we have neither the time nor luxury for confusing claptraps and illusions that parade as illumination. And that may be, at base, what keeps him going, pawning off as mystical truth tricks originally devised to delight may offend the amazing Randi's sense of professional ethics. Could Randi's reward go to other causes? Perhaps. But he's even used at that point to entice fence-sitters into the challenge. Back in 1968, when he first made his dare, the prize was a mere 10 grand. Too little, folks said. Now they balk at 7 figures, feigning selflessness.
Fine,
Randi tells them.
Don't do it for the money. Do it for the satisfaction of making me look like a fool, and give the money to AIDS research or starving children.
Still, no takers to satisfy the skeptic crusader. And for those who insist that such intelligence-insulting gimmicks as stimulators and chakra massage are simply entertainment, or worse, First Amendment protected rights on par with the world's major religions, Randi sighs and returns to his vehicular assault metaphor.
If a fellow wants to climb back into the traffic again, that's his business.
And at the bottom it says, James Talley is a Selena writer and editor. You can send him a message or read his other work through his World Wide Web page at http://members.aol.com/jtally4n6. And I guess that sort of dates it as well. And we have one more on James the Amazing Randi. Going forward a few months to the News Herald dated the 31st of May, 1998, by John Pesenti, the Associated Press. And the title of the article is, That's Bunk. Skeptic James Randi Still Targeting Nonsense. Fort Lauderdale. Scattered among hundreds of books ranging from the scientific to the supernatural are a variety of toys that renowned skeptic James Randi keeps in his library. There's Jean Dixon's horoscope predictor, looking like a big pink calculator, and Uri Geller's Mind Power Kit. And don't overlook the do-it-yourself dowser kit, complete with numerous wishbone-shaped wands to find water and ore.
We always keep up with the devil. I have one thing that bothers the hell out of me, and that's kids being swindled or misinformed.
It's been more than a quarter of a century since Randi exposed Geller, and is readily claiming to bend spoons with his mind. And 12 years since the amazing Randi became the first magician to receive a prestigious MacArthur Foundation grant. Still, he still finds plenty of nonsense to expose. Randi has written several books, debunking everything from faith healers to unicorns and the 16th century seer Nostradamus. The sacred cows of alternative medicine are turned into hamburger by Randi's hyper-rationalist analysis. Chiropractors are shams, in his professional opinion, as are homeopathic medicine and therapeutic touch. In many ways, Randi's greatest trick could be his transformation from a novelty act on the Johnny Carson Tonight Show to a first-rate consumer advocate. He frequently writes for magazines such as Skeptic, Discover, and Scientific American.
I see people being swindled every day by medical quackery, frauds of every sort, psychics and their hotlines, people who claim to be able to find lost children or help them invest their money.
Randi said,
I know they are being swindled because I know the methods being used.
Looking like a modern-day Merlin, he has been described as a giddy leprechaun. Randi speaks a mile a minute, blinking constantly with nervous energy. He performs sleight of hand the way some twiddle their thumbs. A crumpled napkin disappears and reappears at one point in the interview as it orbits Randi's hands like a tiny white planet. Photos of his days as a magician dot the walls of the James Randi Educational Foundation, his non-profit debunking fortress. One shows Randi covered in snaking chains. In another, he dangles in a straitjacket over Niagara Falls, New York. Born Randall James Hamilton Zinger in Toronto in 1928, he dropped out of high school and joined a carnival. He performed his magic at the White House and inspired some of today's most prominent tricksters. Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller said he was 18 when he saw Randi speak, and his life changed. Being ripped off by a cheap ESP kit as a preteen, he hated both science and magic until Randi convinced him otherwise.
The whole 22-year career of Penn and Teller can be attributed to Randi.
Gillette, the more vocal of the performance duos, said from Las Vegas, where the pair was performing.
He's a national treasure. He's someone who will go against any sort of establishment that says it is okay to lie to people, and that is a real radical notion today.
Not everybody is a Randi fan. Ms. Dixon, the late astrologer, once said of Randi,
"He's crazy, isn't he?"
Paranormal scientists seethe at the mention of Randi, calling him an opportunist and publicity hound.
When Christopher Columbus asked Queen Isabella to sail to the New World, James would have been the little guy standing there saying, "The world is flat, man. You're going to fall off."
Said Larry Montz of the International Society for Paranormal Research in Los Angeles. And I'll just quickly break in here and say, yes, I've heard all these arguments too, all these ridiculous statements from the New Age and the paranormal people, completely and utterly misrepresenting what the skeptical point of view is. That's no surprise. We read on. Randi was wowing audiences with his escape routines for more than a decade when, in 1971, he targeted Geller, who had convinced a few scientists he could twist flatware through psychokinesis. In a celebrated show, Randi helped Carson set up the psychic in 1972. The spoons and other props were kept from Geller's hands until showtime, so no tampering would be possible. Geller sat for an agonizing 22 minutes, unable to perform any tricks. Randi also debunked a so-called possessed teenage girl from Ohio and a St. Louis parapsychological laboratory. He found a boy who reportedly vanished in the Bermuda Triangle, biking down his neighborhood street in Rumson, New Jersey. Randi hounded faith healers showing up in disguise at revivals. He continues to dispel the myth of crop circles and mocks homeopathic concoctions, saying they contain not a trace of real medicine. He has been sued more times than he can remember, but never successfully. In 1986, his work was legitimized when he received a $272,000 Genius Grant from the MacArthur Foundation. That led to his own foundation, which offers a $1 million reward to anyone who can prove what he calls the pseudosciences. He investigates outrageous claims and doles out annual Pegasus Awards, a play on when pigs can fly. Two recipients this year were ABC TV for purporting New Age notions without question, and the National Institutes of Health, which budgeted $20 million into research for alternative healing. Randi honors fellow debunkers and last month bestowed a $1,000 award on a 12-year-old, Emily Rosa, of Loveland, Colorado. She found that 21 experienced practitioners of therapeutic touch were unable to detect the energy field they claim to manipulate to treat everything from cancer to burns. Emily's study was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in April. Randi says therapeutic touch often takes advantage of the sickly and elderly, with the tricksters charging up to $70 a session.
If this isn't short quackery, juvenile fantasy, mythology, it's all of the negative things you can say about an idea or theory,
he says. Linda Rosa, Emily's mother, says Randi inspires young people, encouraging them not to accept pseudosciences.
I think we are on the verge of a movement here,
Ms. Rosa said.
As my daughter says, catching adults doing silly things is fun.
go, just a mere smattering of the many articles and reports over the years, especially from US papers, regarding my old mate, who I miss very much, James the Amazing Randi. But you too can look up all sorts of interesting things like paranormal testing or James Randi or astrology or whatever you want to look up by visiting maybe your local newspaper archives from wherever you are in the world. And of course, you're more than welcome to visit the Australian archives at trove.nla.gov.au. But no matter where you're searching, you'll never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Coming up on next week's show, a report about Mind Body Wallet here in Sydney. Yes, it's on again. Later today, I'm heading downtown to visit Mind Body Wallet, microphone in hand, and I will see what I find. Sometimes I don't discover too much down there. Sometimes I discover the most outrageous, bizarre things. So we'll see. Also, next week we have a Trove segment about a dowsing school for students. I suppose school is for students, isn't it? And this is a story from the year 2001. Thank you to those people who continue to support the Skeptic Zone at Patreon or PayPal at skepticzone.tv. And thank you to those new supporters just come on board. I hope you enjoy the show. And the people who do support the show, it's because of you I'm able to buy the equipment to do, for example, the interview with Dr Siobhan that you just heard this week on the show, taking my portable equipment purchased with funds from your generous support. So, yes, thank you very much. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from sunny Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation. Hello, people who keep listening after the music. There it is. There's my dice rolling machine. It's not a machine, really. It's an interesting sort of collapsible box. Anyway, it's the dice game. If you don't know what the dice game is, every now and then I roll a 10-sided die or a 6-sided die or a 30 or whatever. Today it's a 10. And you use your psychic magic, guessing, dumb luck powers, whatever you wish. You can time travel, and then listen to the show, then come back. Anyway, whatever. I'm going to roll this 3 times in this dice rolling contraption, and you use your whatever powers to try and determine which number comes up. Here it comes, number 1, first roll. Shake, shake, and through the machine, 10. 10. There we go. First number is 10. Second number coming up. Here it comes. 4. 10-4. As we used to say in the 1970s, 10-4, a good buddy. Last one coming up, it's 3. Today's winning numbers are 10, 4, and 3.